In this video, I'm going to be going through all the different leaders and giving you my first impressions. Alright, at the beginning, Eridan. Okay, I'm not going to click on each one because the sound. Anyways, order, boost a unit by 4, give it immune. So this is a one-time effect, and you're going to be wanting to use this on cards that, well, you don't want to die. An example of this would be Siri Dash. Siri Dash, after 4 turns, on turn start, draw a card. So you could play Siri Dash, play Eridan on top, and then your opponent won't be able to kill Siri. 4 turns later, you draw a card. Which is nice, but we can do better. You take Caranthir. So Caranthir is to play a 1-power copy of a unit from your hand and summon it to this row. So you can Caranthir a Siri Nova. Now you have a Siri Nova on the board. Then you can give it immune with Eridan. So now you have a Nova on the board that has immunity, but you still have a Nova in your hand, which is pretty cool. So your opponent can't kill it. The only way they're going to kill it is something like Gigni, but obviously don't put the row to 15 and have Nova as the tallest. Sorry, Dash as the tallest. Epidemic, but this shouldn't be an issue because Eridan boosts it by 4 and Caranthir is at 4, so the Dash will be at 5. So it should live. The real way they could play around it is by passing. So you might opt to do this in round 3, or you could just do it in round 1. I don't know. You'd probably opt to do it in round 3. Also, card like Avalok. Avalok is 6 strength, 8 provisions, give an allied unit immune. So if you have this on the board already, and then you play Nova, or you Caranthir into Nova, you could do the same thing as Eridan. Doing 6 damage is pretty difficult, even for Ethne. Outputting 6 damage in 1 turn, unless you have like a Sea Hill and like a Mastercrafted Spear on the board. This should stick. I actually think this should be 9 provisions, because the effect is insane, and doing 6 damage is very, very hard to do. You could always lock it, but you have a lot of other lock targets, presumably in an Eridan deck that you're giving cards immune, so it should stick. Another card you can use with Eridan, Kautilus. This is a fun card. It's basically Sabbath from Live, except instead of hitting the highest unit, it's the lowest unit. So melee every turn on turn end, destroy the lowest unit on the side with the most units. So you don't want to open a round with this card. You want to play it after your opponent has maybe 2, 3, 4 cards. So let's say they have 3 units on the board, you play Kautilus. Let's say your opponent plays another card. Well, actually, no. When you play Kautilus, it'll sack the lowest unit on your opponent's side of the board, and it'll keep doing that. The way you kill this is you lock it, or you just do the damage. But if it's immune because of either Avalok or Eridan, it's going to keep going. An old bug, when you renewed it, or renewed any card that you played Eridan on, it actually kept the immunity. They changed that. It was a bug. It was a little too strong because you could renew Kautilus and it would have immunity, which is insane. One thing you could do is you play this in round 1 after they've played 3 or so units, and then you adrenaline rush it, and then you give it immunity. This makes it so that your opponent can't just pass in round 1. So one of the counters to this, if it's immune in round 1, is to just pass and go into the next round. But if you give it Adrenaline Rush, well, they have to deal with this in round 2. Granted, if you do give it Adrenaline Rush, it means there's 1 turn or 1 window where your opponent can either kill it or lock it, so it's a little more dicey. Also, on top of that, if you are having trouble against this card, it will kill itself. So whoever has the most units loses a unit. So if your opponent has 2 and you have only Kautilus, it'll kill the 1 unit. Now you both have 1 unit. So if your opponent discards a unit, you both have 1. Kautilus, nothing will happen. If you're tied, no unit dies. But if they thunder their last card on the board, Kautilus will actually suicide itself because you have the most units. So it'll kill itself unless you play another unit from your hand. And Kautilus will kill that unit. So just keep that in mind. If you're having issue with this card and you're wondering how to counter it. Whatever. Next leader. Woodland Spirit. Order, boost a unit in your hand by 8. I'm not quite sure what you're supposed to do with this leader, honestly. So I guess you could use it to boost a engine so that your opponent couldn't remove it, but you're better off just playing Eridan because it's immune, and that means it plays around locks. So I'm not quite sure what deck you play Woodland Spirit in. The one that comes to mind is like big monsters. So you have cards like Ghoul that consumes a unit in your graveyard. You play Ghoul with something like Spear Tip, which is just a giant 13-point body, right? You play Spear Tip in round 1. Round 3, you Ghoul it at 14, and you can slap this for +7. That's pretty good. Creates a pretty good finisher. I don't know if that's worth it, though. I honestly don't know what Woodland Spirit, what deck he would work really well in other than that Ghoul list, which is just really greedy tall units that get countered by any tall removal or resets. So I'm not entirely sure where Woodland Spirit fits in. I don't think we'll be seeing him much. Unseen Elder. Order. Trigger an ally's Death Wish ability on round start. Refresh this ability. So you get to proc 1 Death Wish every turn. Death Wish units. The best one is probably Harpy Egg. Spawn a Harpy and summon it to a random row, which it's a 5 strength unit. So if you play Harpy Egg and Unseen Elder, you get 5 points immediately on top of the Harpy Egg. I don't know if it's the best to run, though. Because, yeah, it synergizes well with Death Wish, but Gals is an insanely strong card. Range, whenever you play a unit with Death Wish, trigger its Death Wish ability. So this is basically Unseen Elder, but permanent. So if you were to play Gals and then Eridan it, from then on, for the rest of that turn, every Death Wish card you play is instantly procs. That's pretty good. Granted, you're committing a lot to a round, so you might want to save that kind of combo for round 3. So Unseen Elder might not actually be good, because in a Death Wish list, you're going to want to give Gals immune. Possibly. And it does have one less mulligan. Also, a lot of times in round 2, you end up dry passing, so having the ability in round 2 might not even matter. We'll have to see. I'm very curious to see in what direction Death Wish goes. If they go for like all-out Death Wish lists, or they play like 3 or 4 Death Wish and just try to find like small value. So far out of these 3 monsters, let's actually do the last monster while we're at it. Arrakis Queen. Whenever an allied unit is destroyed during your turn, spawn an Arrakis drone and summon it to a random allied row. So if you play this with Glutsy Warp, destroy all units with 1 power. For each unit destroyed, boost self by 2. This includes your opponent's 1-drops. In theory, if you get an entire board full of 1-drops and your opponent has a few, you slam this down. It's pretty good. I think there's another card. There's another monster card. I don't know what it's called. Yikes. Where are you? I scrolled too far. It's somewhere. Here it is. Yeah. Whenever an ally is destroyed during your turn, boost self by 2. So these two together, Glutsy Warp and She Troll, could be insane. You could play this with cards like Yennefer. Yennefer damages all units by 2. So if you build up an entire board of 1-drops, you could play something like Yennefer, Glutsy Warp, and your She Troll could be huge. I don't actually think that's good. It's funny, but I don't think it's that good. Another card that works well is Monster's Nest. This summons 4 1-drops on a row. This can be good with cards like Golden Froth, which boosts an entire row by 2. So you might just want to go very wide on a row and boost everything. So it could see play in some kind of swarm list. Maybe with Glutsy Warp and She Troll, but I think it's a little too gimmicky. Now, in an all-in consume list, I still don't know if it's correct. One mulligan is really painful. But it is good in an all-in consume list. So if you're playing consume, you play Arrakis Queen. If you're not playing a consume list, well, you're not playing Arrakis Queen. So out of these 4 monster leaders, Arrakis Queen, Elder, Woodland Spirit, and Eridan, I would say we're probably going to see the most Eridan / Arrakis Queen. Would be my guess. I think a bunch of people are going to play Unseen Elder because it's going to, at first, make the most sense because it has the word Deathwish on it. So obviously you put it in a Deathwish deck. But I actually think Eridan's better because Gael's is just such a nutty card. Moving on, let's do SK. Bran. Order, discard a card, then draw a card on turn start. Refresh this ability. Whenever you discard a card, damage a random enemy by 1. So you get to do the first ability 3 times in round 1, 2, and 3. You basically discard a card from your hand, you draw a card. So if you have a bad bronze or just some garbage you don't want, you discard it. Maybe you have Morkvarg, maybe you have Ceres, maybe you have Phoenix, and you don't really want to play any of those from hand. You can brand them. Awesome. So this allows you to thin your deck by 3 for free, which is nice. And then the second ability, whenever you discard a card, including its ability, so whenever you do discard a card with its first ability, you will ping for 1 damage. Whenever you discard a card, damage a random enemy by 1. So SK has a bunch of discarding mechanics. Burn a brand, draw 2, then discard 2. Can be both you and your opponent discard the rightmost card in your hand. This card has a lot of potential. Very strong card. Duran, I actually don't think Duran is discard. I think it's just get rid of. Yeah, it's just move. So this doesn't discard. Very strong card though. So you're going to see this obviously in any kind of deck that needs to find like 5 core cards to win the game, or like some kind of combo deck, because it'll thin your deck, and thinning is very important in a combo heavy list. You can play this in a normal discard deck because you get value out of your discards. And it's kind of hyper thin. You can play discard SK and thin to basically 0, actually. Just don't queue into mill. That's going to be unfun. Crack. Damage a unit by 1. Cooldown 2. Yeah, not a fan. I think this leader sucks. Ethne is strictly better because you can use all 3 in 1 turn immediately, so you can set up cards like Gigny or Scorch, Epidemic, Regis. Crack is good on cards like Queensguard. So you play Queensguard. If this takes damage, you basically use it to ping your own stuff, to proc its abilities. So Queensguard does this, and another card that I cannot remember the name of. We're going to have to go find it. Well, this card. Whenever an adjacent unit takes damage, boost self by 1. So there's some synergy there. Where are you? Here we go. Shield Maiden. Next time this unit takes damage, summon a copy of it from your deck. So synergy there. And Hey May, every turn on turn end, heal all damage allies on this row by 1. So you can damage your units. There's some boosting synergy when you damage, and you can heal. So there's some decent synergy with this, but from what I've seen, it's pretty bad. But maybe I'm missing something, or maybe there's an actual deck which utilizes this very well, and it's actually insane because 4 mulligans is huge. 4 mulligans is a lot. So the deck has to be built around the leader, obviously. You would never just put this in a random SK list because pinging 1 damage is not... Who cares? It doesn't matter. So you build a deck around the leader, obviously. Herald, split 8 damage randomly amongst all enemies. Basically Herald from current Gwent. I'm glad they nerfed this. This used to have 3 mulligans and do 10 damage, which is kind of crazy. You can, if you want to, you can basically save this for round 3 and it's 8 damage. And it doesn't count as a card in your hand, so you basically have 8 points of carryover. You can use this with cards like Great Swords. Great Swords, whenever an enemy on the opposite row takes damage, boost self by 1. So this is basically X-Men from past Gwent. And we have... I don't know the name. It's another X-Men-esque effect, if I can find it. Here we go. Dagger. Whenever an enemy takes damage, boost self by 1. So, you obviously play those two cards and Great Swords all in the same deck. Granted, this is opposite row, and the other card is anywhere. So, the other's slightly better. Obviously, you run all three. So, very good in that deck. Otherwise, you probably won't be seeing this card a lot other than the Great Sword decks. It's not bad. It's a good finisher. You could literally save this plus a Great Sword, and you're getting 16, 19 value, which is good. I will go straight down to Iced, which is the last SK leader. Play a warrior from your graveyard. I am very surprised CDPR actually buffed this card. It used to have 2 mulligans. I don't think people realize how strong of a card this is. Kalmar was running a deck that I was actually playing on last PTR, and you use it with Judah. So Judah, if you play Judah from your hand, it's the highest unit. Damage yourself by 6. So it's a 6 for 7. Doesn't seem very good, right? That's terrible. It's 6 for 7. But Becker's Dark Mirror, choose a unit if boosted, damage it by double the amount boosted. If it's damage boosted by double the amount damage. Sorry, I read that wrong. If it's boosted, damage it by double the amount boosted. If it's damaged, boosted by double the amount damaged. You play this with Judah. Because Judah is damaged by 6, it boosts by 12. So you can play Ice into Judah, which isn't a card, it's your leader. And then use Becker's Dark Mirror, and Becker's Dark Mirror boosted by 12. So your leader with Becker's Dark Mirror is an 18-point play. That's pretty good. And you can have a backup of like Kalmar. Kalmar is another warrior. To play melee, banish a unit in your graveyard and damage an enemy by its power. So if you do have Judah in your graveyard, which is 12, you can Ice Kalmar and ping a unit by 12. That takes 0 cards. That's a leader ability if you have Kalmar and Judah in your deck. Granted, your opponent needs to have a 12 strength card on the board for you to get that full value, but it has the potential of being 15-point swing. That's pretty crazy, and you can save that for round 3, and it has 3 mulligans, which is insane. What we've kind of seen is if it has a really strong finisher, or can be used as a really strong finisher, it has lower mulligans. So, examples of that would be Herald. Francesca used to be 1 mulligan, but because they made Shoot Doomed, they brought her up to 2. So you can use this as a strong finisher. We'll talk about that a little later. Cards like Royal Decree or Renew. Another example would be... Nope. Calvi, look at top 3 cards. Basically play a card from your deck. Well, within 3. So all of these have lower mulligans, whereas cards that have 1 turn effects, or I don't know, effects that aren't as strong and are more seen throughout the game have more mulligans because they're not as explosive in 1 turn. So I'm very surprised CDPR buffed Iced. I actually think it was a mistake. We'll have to wait and see. Alright, Nilfgaard leaders. I'm here. Move a card from the battlefield to your hand and then play a card. So basically, decoy, right? Pick the card back up, redeploy it. Obviously, you're going to be doing it with a deploy ability. So an example of this would be a Witcher. More specifically, Vesemir. So Vesemir, boost all Witcher allies in hand, deck, and on battlefield by 1. So obviously you're playing an all-out Witcher deck with cards that are, well, Witchers. So Vesemir has a old Foltest-esque ability. You boost all your Witchers by 1, and then you play your leader on it, and you do it again. So basically you boost all your Witchers by +2. So cards like these Witchers down here, which tutor the other out. So when you play it normally, it's a 12. But if you play Vesemir twice beforehand, that 12 all of a sudden becomes 3 6 bodies, which is 18. So your 12 gets upgraded to 18. You have an 18-point finisher, which is pretty scary. Cards like Siri go from being 6 strength to 8 strength, which it's an 8 for 8, and it has the bonus effect of potentially giving you an extra card, which is pretty good. A lot of Witchers, I mean, Serit too, Serit and Ox. I mean, this is already well costed. This is a 5 for 7. They're valuing locks across the board in the whole game at roughly 2 provision. And Serit is a 5 that deals 3, so it's 8. This card actually got nerfed. It used to be 8p. And if you have Ox, it's +2, so it's 10, so it's above average. But if you slap +2 on these cards, all of a sudden this is a 7 for 7 with lock, which is really strong. And this is a 10 for 9, potentially 12 for 9. So, yeah, very strong. You're gonna see Witcher decks. They're pretty good. Well, they can be pretty good. Another card to mention, Letho. Remove all redraws from the enemy leader. Be very careful of this card. So basically, a lot of times in round 1, you don't use all your mulligans. Let's say you're playing Ethne, you have 3 mulligans. You'll use maybe 1 mulligan in round 1, and you'll save the other 2 mulligans for round 2 and 3. If your opponent plays Letho, you lose your mulligans. So basically, if you queue into Nilfgaard and you see M here, you should, for now at least, because this is the combo that's being seen, which is Witchers, you should probably opt to use your mulligans. Not all of them. I would probably say keep 1 mulligan. So if you have 4 mulligans, use 3. If you have 3 mulligans, use 2. Unless your hand is like all gold or something and you don't want to mulligan anything. Because getting Lethoed is painful. The reason they would run Letho potentially is because of the +2. So it's a 6 for 11. And some people are a little greedier. I think if people start catching on to this, Letho will get dropped from list. But until that happens, you should probably play around it. So if you see M here, consider using an additional mulligan to play around Letho. Morven, reveal a random card from your opponent's deck. If it's bronze, boost an ally by 3. If it's gold, boost by 4 instead. On round start, refresh this. So similar to Ethne, which we haven't gotten to yet, so that's irrelevant. So you use this on engines. So one engine you would use this on is Manganiello. Right, Manganiello, whenever you reveal a card, damage a random enemy by 1. So you obviously want to play this at the beginning of a round, and you might play Morven on top of it to keep it alive. And then you get the synergy of the reveal from the Manganiello. You also get to boost up your Spheres, which is damage an enemy by 1. This number increases by every reveal that you make throughout the game. So if you use Morven 3 times, which is in round 1, 2, and 3, your Spheres gets plus extra 3. It's just a good card in a reveal deck. The only reason you wouldn't play this in a reveal deck is if you're going to play Usurper. We're going to skip Calvi. We'll get to him in a second. Usurper would be the other leader that you would play in reveal. On game start, disable enemy leader for the duration of battle. I'll say that one more time. On game start, at the beginning of the game, disable the enemy leader for the duration of the battle. So right as the game begins, your opponent gets no leader. So if they built their entire deck around Arrakis Queen and Swarming, or they built their entire deck around Eridan and a combo to keep a unit alive, well, that's going to be gone. And that's painful. That sucks, right? Because a lot of these decks are going to be built around leaders, and Usurper is just going to completely shut that down. Granted, it's 0 mulligans. It's the only leader in the game with 0 mulligans, which is... Play a deck with 1 mulligan, it's painful. Now imagine 0, right? You draw your hand and you keep it. So you cannot play any cards that tutor because, well, you're stuck with your hand. So if you draw a brick, it's a brick. You're never getting rid of it. So honestly, the ability is annoying. It's going to piss off your opponent. This was a very controversial ability. A lot of people hate it. A lot of people love it. A lot of people have very mixed feelings. So with that being said, I don't think it's going to be seen a lot. Maybe on day 1 because people like to try new things and this looks degenerate. So, hey, why not? Long term, I don't think it'll see much play. 0 mulligans is really painful. It limits what you can do with your deck building. I think it will be seen in tournament play because in tournament play, generally you can ban one of your opponent's decks, right? If you want to tech for consume, let's say, but you lose to Ethne control, you can ban Ethne, right? Usurper is kind of like a ban because you're basically negating their leader. It's not that simple because you don't know what you're playing against, but the idea could work. I think this card will be seen in tournament play, which excites me a lot. And it won't see much play in your average casual or ranked play. So it's a scary card, very scary effect. I'm glad it's in the game, but I don't think it's going to see a lot of play because, once again, 0 mulligans is just, it hurts so much. The idea is you're screwing over your opponent, but you're screwing yourself over too because you're not mulliganing squat. Last leader for Nilfgaard, Quan Calvi. Look at the top 3 cards from your deck and play one. So this is just like Calvi in current Gwent. It's flexible. You can use it in round 1, 2, or 3. If your opponent goes pretty heavy in round 1 and you need to catch up in 1 card and you're like 20 behind and you have a 12 in hand, maybe you can Calvi it and pull a card off the top. Worst case scenario, you save it for round 3 and you just get a free card in round 3, which is pretty good. This is a solid leader. If you're building Nilfgaard and you're not playing a Witcher deck and you're not playing a reveal deck and you don't want to tilt your opponent, you're probably going to play Calvi because he is just a good leader. You can play in basically any deck. Playing a card from your deck is never a bad thing. Unless, of course, the top 3 cards are bad. But generally you put good cards in your deck. Scoia'tael, Francesca. Order, play a special card from your graveyard. Fun fact, Shoop didn't used to be doomed. In the public PTR, they gave him the Doom tag. He wasn't originally doomed, which means you could actually Francesca Shoop. So you could play Shoop and then play Shoop again with Francesca. Which sounds insane because in live Gwent, Shoop is the strongest gold card in the game. Granted, the condition is you need 1-ofs in your entire deck. In this Gwent, Shoop is actually not that good. It gets between like 12 and 14 value, and Shoop costs 13p unless they changed it. So, yeah, even if Shoop wasn't doomed, it's still... I mean, you'd probably do it just because it's an extra special to play. So, Francesca. Fun fact. Play special from your cards. So, cards that you're going to be playing twice would be cards like Renew. Granted, Renew's not that good in Scoia'tael because Scoia'tael golds are... well, not good. They're okay. It feels right now Scoia'tael is focused on removing your opponent's win con. So you're going to be using neutral gold cards like Regis to wipe your opponent's rows, or cards like Igni. Destroy the highest unit on the enemy row by... that has 15 or more power. So you're going to be using these neutral golds to kind of swing rounds in your favor. And that's why the next leader, Ethne, is much, much better. Because you can damage the unit by 1 and you have 3 charges. And it resets between each round. So let's say your opponent has a 5, 5, and a 6. You can Ethne ping one of the 6s down to 5. And then you can play Igni, and wipe that whole row. Which is very strong. In normal Gwent, the way you would line up a card like Igni is you would play Archer first, and then your opponent would have a turn to react. In new Gwent, Homecoming Gwent, your opponent doesn't have a turn to interact. They basically have to hope that you don't have Igni, which sounds like it's really frustrating to play against. But if you take the time and look through Scoia'tael, and look at the high end of Scoia'tael, there's not much. So the highest cost card is a 14, and it's a special, not a unit. Ithlin is not a finisher. Shiru's could be a finisher. Shiru's a very strong card now. But once again, this is the type of card that is only good if your opponent plays units. If your opponent doesn't play a lot of units, Shiru kind of sucks. Also, you have to play cards like Call and like Thunderbolt Potion to get value out of this card. Isengrim's Council is not a very good card because there's just not a lot of cards in Gwent at the moment. I think this card will see more play in the future once more expansions come out. This is probably Scoia'tael's best high-end gold card because it's a big immune dragon. And that's just good. Immune is very important in control matchups. Gabor is very strong too, but this is a little bigger. But both strong. This has the flexibility of going into resilience. I apologize. I shouldn't be going into Scoia'tael too far. We're focusing on leaders. The point is, Ethne is very, very, very strong in control decks. Because you can abuse cards like Regis and Gigni. So if you're opting for a control list, Ethne is going to be your leader. Even though Francesca seems to be the go-to because you can replay cards like Epidemic or Scorch. Moving on. Bruver. Order, move a unit to the other row. If it's an enemy, damage by 2. If it's an ally, boost by 2. Charge 3. So you get to move 3 units over the entire period of the game, and you do 2 damage to them, or you boost 2 damage. I don't know what to say. I don't see why you play this card in any deck. I don't. Like, movement's nice. Movement's cute. It works well with Crushing Trap. But I could just play Strays and Dragoons, which both move and have a body attached to it. And they're not leaders. And I could play Ethne, which is better and works well in any control list. You could play this with movement cards, like Brigade, damage a random enemy by 2. Whenever Brigade is moved to the other row, repeat its deployability. So you could play Brigade and then Bruver it 3 times. It would go +6 and then damage a random enemy by 2. So it'd be 6, 6, 12, and 15. It's a 15-point play, assuming you blow all 3 charges. Which sounds like a lot. And I guess it is? I mean, now that I say it out loud, I guess it's okay. As a finisher? It just feels so awkward. Maybe Bruver is okay. Whenever an enemy is moved to another row, damage it by 1 whenever. Okay, so Bruver could be nuts if you can build up a board. So if you could get 2 sentries on the board and like a brigade, and you slam brigade and move it around a couple times, it could be good. I don't like the fact that your win con is based around bronzes that are small, and these are pretty easy to remove at 3. Also, there's not much synergy. This is literally it. I guess you could play... It's finicky. I actually think I might have to explore this leader a little bit. It is a nice win con, and it is 3 mulligans. So based on what I said earlier, technically this should be like a 2, because it is technically a finisher. But it is a finisher that's dependent on you drawing a very specific bronze card. Whereas like Iced is draw Beckers, which... I guess drawing a bronze is a little easier than drawing a single gold. Well, maybe Bruver is okay. Maybe. I'm gonna have to... Here's the problem. You can't use your leader in round 1 or 2. You have to save it for round 3 if you're going to go with that game plan. And saving your leader for round 3 is kind of rough because Scoia'tael doesn't have big tempo plays. Generally, you want to be using your leader in round 1 to help with your tempo. So this could work if there's a Scoia'tael list that can put good tempo in round 1. And you can afford to save your leader for round 3. Okay, maybe this leader's a little better than I thought. My initial reaction was this leader sucks. and it's unplayable. Just play Ethne, but maybe it's okay. Well, we'll see. We'll have to play with it. Last Goetel leader, Philavandrel. Order, boost all units in your hand by 1. So 4 mulligans, very, very, very good mulligans. But generally you're going to want to play this in round 1 because, well, you want a full hand, which means 10 cards, which means, well, round 1. I guess you could do round 2, but if you go pretty hard into round 1, you're not going to have a full hand in round 2. The downside of this is you're blowing your leader in round 1, which means you have no leader in round 2 or 3. Also, you're generally playing your cards that you have in your opening hand in round 1, or at least like 6 of them. Between 4 and 6 of them, usually. So this card works very well with defenders, which is every turn on turn end boost off by 1 if this unit is boosted. So if you have this in your opening hand and you fill a Vandrel, it'll start at 5, which is boosted, and it'll start ticking +1 every turn, which is very strong. Another card Philo works very well with is Marauder. Deploy. If this unit is already boosted, gain resilience. So these are bronzes that you're going to be running to run in your Philavandrel deck. If you have them in your opening hand, you're going to be very happy. You're going to want to play Mahaka Marauders towards the end of a round because you don't want your opponent to have as much removal or lock effects. That applies also to round 2. This card is also very good if your opponent opts for a dry pass in round 2, which is fairly common. You can play a Marauder and carry it over into round 3 and get free carryover, which is very strong. The downside of Philavandrel is if you lose round 1, as I said, you have no leader in round 2 and 3, which is suboptimal. So if you're playing a Philavandrel deck, you basically have to win round 1, which is doable because your entire hand is +1. So your 6s are now 7, 7s 8, etc. So you have 10 extra points on the board. So in theory, you should be able to win the round. Also, you have 4 mulligans, which means you can blow 2 mulligans and still have 2 later on, potentially 3 later on if you lost coin flip. Because if you lose coin flip, okay, you're going first, you get +1 extra mulligan. So you can have up to 5 mulligans, which is a lot on Philavandrel. So yeah, you have to win round 1. So if you're going to build a deck, you need to build a deck that can win round 1. You're probably going to be running Roach in that deck, which now that I think about it, I should probably put Roach in my Philavandrel deck. Because winning round 1 is a necessity. Because you need to have control of round 2. You want to bleed round 2, play carryover. Even if you're a card down in round 2 because you lost like tempo advantage, you're going to have like 8 to 12 carryover with cards like Marauders and Gabor, which is another resilient cards that you're going to be wanting to play in Philavandrel lists. So I think it can be a very strong leader with the right deck. I think it's going to take a while, but I do think there will be a deck that revolves around Philavandrel. It's just going to take a little bit of tweaking. That's it for Scoia'tael leaders. And last but not least, NR. King Foltest. Order, boost an ally by 1, and give it Zeal. 3 charges. And these do not refresh. This is 3 charges for the whole game. You're going to be wanting to use this on cards that have Order. So cards that have Order in NR are going to be like machines. So let's say you have a Ballista on the board. This is a terrible example. Better example, Aquos is not an NR card. Neutral. Aquos, this has Order. Order, for those of you who don't know, basically means it has a 1-turn timer. You play the card, you have to wait a turn. When it comes back to you, you can use the effect. If you give a unit that has Order Zeal, you get to bypass that 1-turn wait, and you get to immediately use the effect. So the effect of Aquos is damage all enemies by 1. So you could play Aquos, use your leader on it, give it Zeal, and immediately proc and deal 1 damage to all opponent's units. So if you're playing King Foltest, you're going to be playing a lot of cards with orders. So you could play Blaze, which is damage an enemy by 1, 5 charges, so it's about 10. You're valuing those 5 pings very high. I don't actually think this card is good. You could play Gaunter, which is basically, if you could bypass the order, which is what Foltest will do, its Gaunter is play the card and kill any card you want, because you don't have to wait that turn. You could play, I don't know how to say this, Angoulême. Play a random artifact from your opponent's deck, so you play it, you don't have to wait a turn and hope your opponent can't do 4 damage or lock it. You can automatically trigger it, and you have an artifact. So you're going to be wanting to play a lot of order effects in Foltest. Honestly, is that good? I think NR is in a very weird position right now. Historically, NR has been a faction that at first seems very bad, but it's usually just because people don't know how to build the right deck. So I think with a lot of testing and messing around with different combos and different lists, people will eventually come up with a solid NR list. But like day 1, day 2, you're not going to see a lot of NR. And if you do see NR, you're probably going to destroy it, because they're not going to be optimized lists, and they're just not going to work well. So I think this card has a lot of potential. Also 4 mulligans. Basically any leader with 4 mulligans has potential, because 4 mulligans is worth a lot. King Henselt, play a copy of an allied unit on the battlefield from your deck, boosted by 4, and give it Zeal. So this also gives Zeal, but it's a one-time thing. In last PTR, there was a bug. You could play multiple units. You could pull up to like 6 units from Henselt. It was insane. You could do like 60-point swing turns. With some setup, you would have to put duplicate units back into your deck. You would do that in round 2, 1 and 2, and you set up your Henselt. They nerfed it, obviously, because playing 60 points with your leader is, well, stupid. I don't know how good this is. Playing 1 unit from your deck and giving it Zeal, because it can only be 1, I don't think this is very good. I think they should actually boost his mulligans to 3 to compensate. Maybe there's some nutty bronze combo where this is actually good, but my initial impression is this is not very good. King Demavend, give 1 charge to a unit, cooldown 2. So you're going to want to play this in a NR deck, obviously. And you're going to want to play it with machines. So a lot of these machines have abilities. Let's find one. Damage a unit by 2, charge 1, reach 2. So it starts with, I believe, 1 charge. Yeah, it starts with 1 charge. But once you use that charge, you have 0 charges left. So this is a 3 and it does 2 damage, and that's it. But if you give it plus 1 charge, then it can do 2 damage again. You can do the same thing with Ballista. Damage a unit by 1, charge 1, reach 2. You give it another charge, it can do more damage. So a lot of cards have charges and have abilities. The more charges they have, the more times you can proc the ability. So if you're playing a heavy NR list, a heavy machine NR list with tons of charges, you are going to be playing King Demavend. Once again, I don't know if it's good because, well, personally, I don't think Order is very strong. To me, Order is just play a unit and it will die. Granted, I'm biased because I play Scoia'tael, I play removal deck, so from my view, when my opponent plays Order, it doesn't do anything. I just kill it, so they're losing value on every card they play. But the reality is, as the meta kind of settles, and actually I don't know how long the meta will settle. It could take anywhere from 3 days to, I mean, in live Gwent, it took us 6 months to settle a meta, so I mean, could never settle with the patches and stuff. We'll see. I don't know how to evaluate it. Honestly, I haven't played much NR, and I haven't seen this leader much. It has might have potential. So right now there's a lot of control decks because people are, for some reason, building control decks. I think it's easier to build control decks just because the more point slime oriented decks have to be more optimized to play well or to do well. So we're seeing a lot more of these control lists. NR lists are heavily focused on engines, so running into control lists sucks. I think as the meta develops and people find combos, find lists, find more optimized, deck list, people aren't going to run as much control, and they're going to be more point slam oriented, because that's generally how Gwent has shifted in its history. So if that happens, engine-based decks will be stronger because there will be less removal out there. So King Demoven might be quite good. Now the last leader, I'd say last but not least, but this is by far the least in terms of NR leaders, and maybe all the leaders. Princess Ada, damage a unit by 8. That's it. Damage a unit by 8. Cool. So, well, not cool actually. It sucks. If your opponent loses coin flip and goes first and has tactical advantage, and let's say they play, I don't know, a 3 strength engine, and then they buff it with tactical advantage to 8, you can Princess Ada it and kill the engine. That sucks. It's 8 points of carryover. You can save it for round 3. It's a worse Herald because Herald doesn't require, it requires your opponent to have 8 points on board to get max value, but it could be a 3-3 and a 2. Whereas if you're Princess Ada and you're in round 3 and they have a 3-3 and 2, this is doing 3. That sucks. I don't understand the point. I don't know where you run this. Maybe there's a meta with engines that are tall. I don't know. I don't know why you play this card. I honestly don't know. I wish it was just like lock 2 cards. Or lock 2 cards and do 4 damage to each of them, which is current live Radovid. I don't know. Maybe that's too strong. It probably is. Maybe make it 2 damage and lock. I don't know. I don't know what you play this in. Ada might actually be the worst leader in the game. I mean, even Woodland Spirit is like proactive, whereas this is reactive. I don't know. I mean, it has 3 mulligans. That's nice, I guess. If it had 4 mulligans, I still wouldn't play it. 5 mulligans? Maybe. I say maybe because mulligans are nice. And the more the merrier. Not a huge fan of this card. Don't think it'll see much play. All right, that's it. I know some of the leaders I went a little off track, but it's okay. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video on my first impressions of the leaders. Obviously, these opinions will change as the game progresses and as expansions get released, but as of now, this is what I think. See you later.